let me read you again what was printed on the U.S. Embassy website on March the 7th. And I want you to maybe hold this date and put a big circle around it because it's very important. This is what it was said over 2 weeks ago. The embassy is monitoring reports that extremists, have imminent plans to target large gatherings in Moscow. It targets Moscow directly here, to include concerts. Again, concerts. So we've got the embassy, imminent targets, Moscow, concerts, and U.S. citizens should be advised to avoid large gatherings over the next 48 hours. Well, I can't really answer this, but maybe Scott Ritter can help us understand it. Welcome to the program, Scott. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Well, Scott, we've seen that March 7th warning. Thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, first of all, let's look at what that represents. It means that the United States intelligence community had information about specific information, specific enough to warn people away from concert venues, about a impending attack by extremists. They didn't identify at least publicly identify who these extremists were, on targets in Moscow at a specific time period. Now, some people will say, well, that time period wasn't reflected in what actually happened. I mean, you can't talk about 48 hours after the 7th. That takes you at 8th and 9th, 10th maybe, and then you have this attack take place nearly 2 weeks later. What's the connection? We know that the terrorists arrived from Turkey. Two of the terrorists at least arrived from Turkey to Russia on or about March 4th. We also know that based upon a video that's been captured in their phones, that they carried out a reconnaissance of the Crocus City Hall concert venue prior to the U.S. Embassy warning. At that time, because it was pre-election, security was very extensive. There was multiple layers of security, heavily armed individuals, and I think these terrorists opted not to execute the plan and to wait until security dropped. But now we have to ask the question: okay, how do you wait? I mean, if you came in with a specific attack, and again, there's so many aspects to this. One, they published a photograph shortly after the attack that was taken up by the ISIS media network, and that's important to point out, because if ISIS Central Command tends to publish information about an attack, that means that it was known in advance by ISIS. But if their media outlet publishes, it means that they're taking credit after the fact. A photograph was published after the attack that shows these four perpetrators taking and making an allegiance to the ISIS flag. Their faces were blurred. Now, I've been looking at ISIS and Al Qaeda for some time now. When videos or photographs of this nature are put out, the faces are never blurred, because these guys are supposed to be dead. They're supposed to be martyrs. The fact that these faces were blurred meant that they weren't seeking martyrdom. And one of the reasons why they perhaps wouldn't be seeking martyrdom is that they gave the oath, the Hashauda, with their left hand. No Muslim does that. These weren't practicing Muslims. This was a photograph that was staged to create the impression of ISIS involvement. Let me give another hint to the audience here. The Russian authorities have all the phones. They have all the information on the phones. Because of the information on the phones, 11 additional people were detained in Moscow. This is the support network. We'll get to that in a minute. And because of the information on the phones, Russia shared very specific information with Turkish authorities, who this morning arrested 40 people in Turkey. The Russians know exactly what happened. Because of the information on the phones, the Russians know that these people were communicating with people in Ukraine to open up a safe corridor of passage. That was the true north for these terrorists. That's where they were going to escape. These weren't martyrs. They didn't have suicide vests. These people intended to live. They had been paid to do a job, and part of that job was to create the impression that they were affiliated with ISIS. But they weren't. They weren't ISIS fighters. And I think what you'll find out when the when the Turks start talking about these people that were in there, that these are all cutouts. These are people who thought they were doing something with ISIS, but it ends up they were being controlled by somebody else. And that somebody else is Ukrainian intelligence, backed up by the Central Intelligence Agency. This has the fingerprints of Ukraine and the United States all over it. It has no fingerprints of ISIS.
Does the guns that they use, the artillery that they use, does that say anything, or is that easily, I mean, you're a weapons inspector, can that be easily to maybe put the authorities that are investigating something like this, if they say, okay, these guns came from,
Well, I mean, we know that at least one of the weapons was an AK-12. That's a weapon that's very specific to the Russian military. It's a weapon that the Ukrainians have captured. They pride themselves in these weapons as trophies. I'd be interested in the serial number of that weapon, what its origin was, where it disappeared, and who possibly controlled it. The two guys that came in from Turkey didn't bring weapons with them. They fill in on a cache of weapons in Moscow. That cache was prepared by the two people the two Muscovites, the two Tajiks who lived in Moscow. Here's something that people need to understand. The United States, and I have experience in this. I used to not work for the CIA, but I worked with the Special Activities Division, which are the people that did this, the covert operators. The United States, the British, the Israelis in Iraq, they used the Kurdish population of Baghdad to create safe houses, to create networks of informants, to facilitate the movement of material, personnel, etc. There was a large Kurdish population in Baghdad. The vast majority of them were loyal to the Iraqi government, but many of them weren't. And so these Kurds were used as a population that could be exploited by the CIA, the British, and Mossad for a variety of purposes, to include sending covert communication means, to send weapons, bombs, explosives, things of that nature. The United States has, for some time now, been carrying out a campaign targeting the periphery of Russia, targeting the Southern Caucasus, Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, trying to create unrest there, to recruit from the populations there. Because the thing about Russia is it carries the legacy of the former Soviet Union, which means that there's large Georgian communities, there's large Azeri communities, there's large Armenian communities already in Russia who consider themselves to be part of Russia. But many of them maintain connectivity back to their the places of their birth, and that connectivity is exploited by foreign intelligence services or the intelligence services of their nations for nefarious purposes. The same thing can be said of the Central Asian, former Soviet republics of Central Asia, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan. The United States has been recruiting heavily from these populations. They take advantage of the immigration flow into Russia to set up communities that the intelligence community can use for a variety of purposes. And the United States has been working closely with Ukraine to do the same thing. So Ukraine has dovetailed on past practice of the United States to establish these communities inside Russia that are sympathetic to Ukraine, that can be used for a variety of purposes. We've seen over and over again how the FSB, the Russian security service, has arrested people throughout Russia who have been communicating with the Ukrainian intelligence authorities to carry out specific acts of terrorism, sabotage, intelligence collection, etc. So now we have these two terrorists showing up from Turkey. They're met by two Moscow-based Tajiks. That implies there is a cell operating inside Moscow. And then, because they can't carry out the attack because of security, that cell allows them to have a place to stay, gives them the means to get food, and to continue to do the reconnaissance and the work around Moscow, avoiding detection. They disappear into the Tajik community. And I'm not picking on the Tajiks. It's just the way it works. They're a community that is susceptible to being exploited, especially if you're an illegal who's in Russia without proper registration. And so you've already fallen in on a network of people who, by their very existence, seek to avoid detection from Russian authorities, not because they're planning terrorist attacks, but because they don't want to be kicked out of Russia. So they're operating in the gray zone, out of sight, out of mind, the perfect place to put in this kind of safe haven, this kind of network. And so they sit there, they lay low until the time comes to attack. And then they attack. They attacked when security had been diminished. I think the Russian authorities have a lot of questions they need to answer, like why was security diminished? You were tipped off by the United States. You were securing this site at one time with extensive security. Now you no longer were. Why? What made you make that decision? What took so long to respond? I think there's a lot of questions about the response time, et cetera. These are fair questions, but they don't negate the reality that this attack was not done by ISIS. This attack was claimed by ISIS after the fact, as part of the cover story. Again, they have the phones. I'm just telling you right now, the Russians know everything. People like me are now trying to pick pieces of the information at the puzzle and put it together. The Russians already have the puzzle together. They have the phones. They listen to the conversations. They've tracked down everything. They know everything. That's how quick this works. Just to bring up a periphery, Evan Gershowitz, the Wall Street Journal journalist that was arrested in Ekaterinburg, and the Wall Street Journal's like, oh no, he was a journalist. And the Russians like, no, he wasn't. The Russians know everything. They have all the information. The fact that they don't make it public means that they aren't the United States, who leaks every classified piece of information to the press. The Russians don't care about informing people about what they know. They only care about their security. The Russians know everything. They know who planned this attack. It's the Ukrainians. And that's why last night's attack took out very specific targets in Kiev related to this, including one that people are scratching their head going, why did they take out this former civil defense site? Because it was no longer a former civil defense site. It was a Ukrainian intelligence headquarters carrying out this kind of targeted irregular warfare, unconventional warfare, guerrilla warfare, terrorism inside Russia. The Russians know everything. They have the phones, and the phones reveal all.
Question for you, Scott. Is there any checks and balances of, artillery coming into, guns and weapons coming into Ukraine? I mean, does that end up on the black market, which then gets sold to terrorist organizations? Is that how it works? Or
I wouldn't say artillery and not heavy weapons. The stuff that makes it into the black market, stuff that can fit in the trunk of a car, Javelin missiles, AT-4 missiles, weapons of that nature, anti-tank weapons, Stinger missiles, anti-aircraft missiles, machine guns, automatic rifles, pistols, grenades, mines, mortars. These are the weapons of low intensity conflict. These are the weapons that terrorist organizations or militant groups want. Tanks aren't dropping off the back and appearing on the black market. F-16s aren't dropping off the back and appearing on the black market. But it's the stuff that goes in the back of the trunk of a car, the stuff that, as they are offloading the truck, you have three Mercedes or BMWs or Audis pop up and the trunk pop out, and they're like, one for the Ukrainian army, one for you, one for the Ukrainian army, two for you, one for the Ukrainian army, one for you, and then money exchange hands. And then with the high level of cash, it's very easy for me, if I were running this operation, to report back, yep, we had a truck hit. We were moving equipment to Bakhmut, and we got hit by Russian artillery, and we lost 3 trucks, and the following equipment was destroyed. And some of that equipment may have legitimately been destroyed, but I guarantee you, he's sitting there with a piece of paper in his pocket, and the next time there's an attack, he adds that truck with the equipment that was destroyed. And now the stupid Americans come in and go, how do you account for this? Well, we were at war and they blew up that truck and just the stuff. And the Americans have no way of verifying that. No way of verifying that. And we write it off. And meanwhile, around the world, weapons are showing up where they shouldn't.
So we know some information on this organization, what they were doing, or I guess this group of terrorists. But I mean, what would it take to pull something like this off? Okay, so guns. How are they communicating? Are they communicating on applications that are trying to, be encrypted? I mean, how is something like this put together?
Well, I mean, we could just look at past practice. The CIA has acknowledged that it uses Telegram to communicate covertly. Uh, they also use Gmail, and they acknowledge that too. When Ryan Fogel, a CIA agent or officer operating under diplomatic cover at the U.S. Embassy, was arrested, I think in 2014. Um, he's the guy with the blonde wig and everything, the money. He had a letter that basically was telling the guy that they were trying to recruit how to, the Gmail address and how to go there and the procedures to use. You open up this address and you type in your report, but you don't send it because the CIA operator also has the login credentials, and so he just comes in and takes a look at the letter that you wrote, but it never was really transmitted on channels that could be intercepted, and then he responds back, and then you open it and read his response, but you're not sending. It's just there. It's a letter that's doing that. That's one way they do it. The other one is through Telegram. Telegram has encryption that's fairly decent, and it allows for at least short-term, secure communications. But the problem is all communications are captured at some point in time. Telegram is captured by the Russians, and when they get your phones and they look at your phone logs, and they go back and they can take that information and decrypt it and move it. And if they suspect you that you're communicating, they have the ability to get into the system and monitor your communications real time. You may think it's encrypted, but it's not. But you use social media platform. The key thing about communications today is that unless you're extraordinarily sophisticated, you would only share this level of sophisticated with highly trained personnel who you trust have good operation procedures and things. There are, of course, classified ways of communicating. Now, I don't need to get into it. First of all, I don't know because I haven't been involved in this business for a long time. But I can tell you that, going back, the CIA always has covert means of communication within the CIA that work, but it's not perfect. I'll give you an example. 2003, the CIA kidnapped an Egyptian cleric out of Italy. They thought he was part of Al Qaeda, so they went there, thumped him on the head, and took him off. And off he goes to Egypt and then to Guantanamo Bay or wherever they sent him. And it was supposed to be a covert op, meaning no one's supposed to know about it, but because they're stupid. This is the CIA. It's not even cutouts. They didn't hide their tracks, and the Italians suddenly got the phone numbers, went to the cell towers, and were able to reconstruct the entire communication chain associated with this, who they were communicating with and why. And suddenly the CIA station chief who's making the phone calls and receiving the phone calls has to leave the country, along with all the CIA personnel in Rome station. They're gone. And the Italians published the names of 20 CIA agents and say, we have warrants for their arrest because they violated the law. This is the CIA working within CIA channels. So there's always slop and mistakes. But here on something like this, first of all, you have to establish a cover story. Before you build a communications plan, you have to create deniability. And so ISIS is the deniability. It's the cover. So you do a number of things. One, you're going to say, okay, if the Russians reverse engineer this, which they will because we know how good they are, we don't want it to point to Ukraine. We want it to point elsewhere. Except you sent them to Ukraine for their escape plan. That was a bad move because they're on the phone with people in Ukraine saying, we're on our way, open the border, and they're opening the border, and then they got caught. Bad move on the part of whoever planned this operation. But the point is, these guys talk about, for instance, the two guys that moved from Turkey to Moscow. They talk about how they were in communication with somebody on Telegram, an imam or an assistant of the imam. They never met the guy. It's just online recruiting. Which is how the CIA works, which is how many people work. ISIS, not so much. I see ISIS knows that the CIA penetrated, or the U.S. intelligence service penetrated their social media networks. So starting around 2017, 18, 19, ISIS changed the way they do business. And they don't use social media that way anymore. But the CIA, having learned about how ISIS works, can take advantage of dupes. And so they begin reaching out to recruit. The two guys that went to Moscow don't know that they're working for the CIA. They may not even know that they're working for the Ukrainians. We have to find out who was making the phone calls. They were just along for the ride. Their job was to go in and shoot people, slit throats, and burn things down. But now they're in a car that's making a move towards the Ukrainian border. And the guys that were working in Moscow, they know who they were working for. They know who their contacts are. They know, who was buttering their bread. And they're the ones making the call to Ukrainians. But this whole ISIS cover story was put up there as a smokescreen to deflect attention away. Immediately after the attack, this photograph appears online. Where did it get posted from? Well, the Russians know. It got posted from one of the terrorist phones because they took the picture and then they posted it, or they took the picture and sent it to somebody who posted it for them. But it was designed to do that. Then they released the video. Remember the video of them shooting people and slitting the throats. They took that. This isn't somebody they took that. They posted it. When did they post it? They posted it while they were driving to Ukraine in a car. The Russians have said, we know about this car. We knew when it left Moscow. We were following it. We were listening to the phone calls as they were driving to Ukraine. We were monitoring it. That's why immediately upon the arrest of these four guys, 11 people were arrested in Moscow because they were contacting everybody. Hey, clean up the safe house, burn the clothes, do this. And the Russians are going, no. The Russians have the safe house. I've seen photographs of it. They've taken the safe house. They've taken down the network. And those people are singing like canaries. And the Russians know everything. The CIA set this up. Or what I'm saying is the Ukrainians set this up. The CIA trained Ukraine on these techniques, though. From 2014 to 2022, the CIA was working with Ukrainians. Budanov, who's the current head of the GUR, the military intelligence, was receiving specific training from the CIA's Special Activity Center, the covert operators, the guys I used to work with. They're training him on irregular warfare. That means terrorism. Irregular warfare means that you're behind enemy lines, blowing up bridges, attacking targets, disrupting elections, doing things. This attack was meant to disrupt the election, the Russian election. The timing of it was originally meant to be before the election took place, to create unrest, to make it difficult for Russians to want to go out and vote. But the security blocked it, so it happened later. But it was designed to disrupt the elections. This is irregular warfare. This is unconventional warfare. This is what the CIA's ground branch of the Special Activities Center trained the Ukrainians on. And the Ukrainians have been carrying out this kind of action for the entire scope of the war. Long range sabotage missions, blowing up trains here, there, and everywhere. That's all Ukrainian action done with CIA preparation. Now, what the Ukrainians have done here is take it up another step. And the CIA may not have been aware of this, but when you create Frankenstein's monster, and then the monster gets loose and starts rampaging the city, you're responsible. We created this monster. The U.S. has all but admitted this. I mean, the New York Times has published stories about it where the CIA sort of bragging. It's amazing how they brag about it when things are going well, but right now they're going to be hands off. But the CIA created this capability within Ukraine. The fact that Ukraine is exercising this capability shows the level of desperation, because people say, well, why would Ukraine want to do this? Let's make it clear. Ukraine is losing this war, has lost this war. The only chance Ukraine has of winning this war, and by winning that means surviving, is to get Russia to overreact. This is why Ukraine continues to blow up oil refineries, to attack Belgorod, to invade. The CIA is behind an invasion of Russia as we speak. Those Russian nationalist groups that work for Ukrainian intelligence are trained, equipped, directed by the CIA. How do we know? Well, the U.S. military is not allowed to touch them, and yet they have M2 Bradleys. Who trained them on the M2 Bradleys? Who gave them the M2 Bradleys? It's called the ground branch of the CIA Special Activities Center. That's who's doing this. So we know that they haven't drawn the line in invading Russia, because they're invading Russia as we speak. We know they haven't drawn the line at carrying out strategic attacks in the Russian depth against oil depots. These are attacks that are planned in Langley by people who look at the totality of Russia's energy infrastructure and says, how can we bring harm to the Russians to disrupt not only the war effort, but to disrupt them economically by disrupting exports to other nations? It's a very targeted campaign. Ukraine doesn't have the sophistication to do that. The U.S. does, the British do, and we give them the information. We give them the intelligence picture so they can have their drones fly through the gaps in Russian air defense to reach the targets. We do that, and we have been doing that. And suddenly we're supposed to say, oh, but we draw the line at a campaign to murder Russians in the Crocus City Hall. No, the CIA has a mission. Again, Special Activity Center. They have a special political action division whose job is to carry out coup d'etats, to carry out election disruption. That's one of their principles. The CIA has been involved in disrupting Russian elections since 2004. And they continue to this day. The CIA has an active plan. Navalny was part of that plan, people. Bing. And so the light bulb should go out sooner or later. And so this attack was part of an election disruption campaign. The only question is, did the Ukrainians go rogue on this one, or was the CIA involved? And I think at the end of the day, the Russians will find that out as well, because here's where the U.S. made a mistake. They had intelligence that they released that identified ISIS as the perpetrator. They immediately said Ukraine had nothing to do with this, which tells you that they know a lot more than they're letting on, and they probably spoke too soon. They're too eager by far to cover this thing up, and I think the Russians are going to be knocking at the door pretty soon, saying, "We know exactly what you did. We know exactly who did it, and there will be hell to pay."
Scott, question about mobile devices. I did speak with a gentleman that used to be in the mobility, I guess, what was he? His position was R&D, we'll call it. And he was telling me that, mobile devices intentionally would drain a battery down to zero. Say your phone would be dead, but in reality, there would be 8 to 10% left of that battery that would emit signals. Even though you think your phone is off, it would still, communicate with the networks. And even then, when you're pulling in some of these old mobiles, when you're pulling the battery out, they would still have a small battery to power the system in behind it. I mean, how did the Russians get some of the information out of the phone where some of these guys could say, oh, okay, well, we're going to screen lock it. You need a court order, or does Russia have a different way and method of getting information out of these guys quicker?
Well, I'm pretty sure that the Russians don't have the same constitutional restrictions that the United States has. But let's be clear here: the United States doesn't care about constitutional restrictions. The FBI, the CIA, the NSA, Homeland Security, they do whatever the hell they want. Then afterwards, they go and they try and cover it up with court orders and warrants and all that stuff. So we do the same thing the Russians do, which is constant surveillance. We know that the Russians were looking for a cell phone at the center, and they found that cell phone. They seized. They went around and got everybody's cell phones, and made sure they belonged to them. But they found the one cell phone, and then that cell phone allowed them to immediately build a track record of who they're calling and go out. And then the Russians have a capability of doing mobile tracking. It's not my business to speculate how that works, but anybody who is familiar with this knows how it's done. Cell towers, and and the Russians track these guys, and they were monitoring their communications real time. And that's just I would say this: if you have a cell phone, I have a cell phone. I just assume that I'm being monitored every second. That everything I say, do on the cell phone is being tracked by the U.S. government, by the Russian government, by the Chinese government, by the Canadian government, by any government. And I don't care, because I'm not doing anything that breaks the law. I'm at the point right now where, if you guys want to know, what my Google search is, there it is. It's yours. Have at it. If you want to know who I'm talking to, It's right there. I don't do covert communications anymore. And if I did, I sure as hell wouldn't do it on this phone. There's other ways to communicate that wouldn't involve me, giving it to you, gifting it to you.
Have they foiled this attack once and for all, or is there something else brewing behind this?
I think the Ukrainian intelligence service has a campaign plan to sow chaos in Russia. I think the U.S. is now aware that the Ukrainians have gone rogue, and the U.S. is doing whatever they can to put the brakes on this. There's been some meetings, there's been speculation about the nature of the meetings between the U.S. ambassador and the Ukrainians, but so-called informed sources say that these meetings were intended to tell the Ukrainians to stand down, that this is not acceptable, and the United States won't support it. But I don't think the Ukrainians care at this point. I think they feel betrayed by the United States. They feel betrayed by NATO. They feel betrayed by the West. And I think that, this is their version of the Samson option, meaning if they're going down, they're going to take as much down with them. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's additional operations of this nature in the works by the Ukrainians. And what'll be interesting is if the United States, because clearly we are cognizant of these. We created Frankenstein, so we know how what Frankenstein operates. Is the United States going to start feeding information to the Russians so that the Russians can head off some of these attacks? Because the United States know that there will be blowback. I mean, you can't carry out an action like this. You can't be involved in an action like this inside Russia and not have any consequences, especially if the Russians find out about it.
I mean, Scott, we keep going back to, the Ukrainians and saying, okay, look at, they're behind this. We've have intelligence for that, but what can really be done? I mean, I saw Zelensky yesterday on his TikTok upload, and the guy looked totally disheveled. I mean, he looked like a guy that was under a bright camera in a room with a table. He looked like he had no friends in the world. He looked scared as hell. The words coming out of his mouth, he was just mumbling them. Does this guy really now get it? Like, okay, it was okay to fly in to see you in Kiev. It was the cool thing to do. But now, is he a dead man walking?
I think he is. I think the Russians had given assurances to Zelensky via various intermediaries. And indeed, the Russians had given assurances to all of Zelensky's supporters that they would not target leadership. This is why people felt so safe to fly into Kiev. Again, I just want to point out the targets that were struck last night by the Zircon missiles, or not, by the Dagger Kinzhal missiles. Look at the precision of them. They took out a specific apartment complex leading to neighboring buildings untouched. The building they took out was a former civil defense facility that had been converted for use by the Ukrainian intelligence service to run these kind of covert operations against the Russians. The Russians took it out. That means that they have specific information. They have specific knowledge. The Russians could have assassinated and can assassinate Zelensky at any time. They can do the same thing to Budanov, and they can do the same thing to any foreign delegation that comes into Kiev. The Russians so far have not done this because this is a special military operation, not war. But because of what has happened in Moscow, the Crocus City Hall attack, I think the gloves are off. And I think it's quite clear that Zelensky's days are numbered. Budanov's days are numbered. Anybody who is remotely affiliated with this attack, their days are numbered. Putin's made it clear, you will be hunted down, you'll be killed. It doesn't matter what nationality you are, it doesn't matter where you reside. I wouldn't want to be the CIA's officer whose name's on the Ukrainian documents about training these people or helping facilitate this, because the Russian arm is long and the Russian arm is patient. And Yeah, but if Zelensky I think he knows now. I think he was briefed by the American ambassador that because of this, he's lost his umbrella of protection, and that you know, good luck.
We heard Kirby speak yesterday. I mean, what kind of update of intelligence is he going to get? Because he looked very subdued as we put Shinju's comment on the screen there. Would he have a very clear update of what was going on, or you know?
Kirby is a propagandist. He's a information warrior. He's only as good as the information he receives from the people who only give him the information they want him to have. He's not aware of, for instance, CIA covert operations unless those covert operations are being discussed in a forum where the United States is being tasked with spinning, in which case he will have peripheral knowledge but not detailed knowledge. So I think, let me put it this way. I've spoken with a journalist who communicates with Kirby often. And Kirby knows that what he says oftentimes is a lie because he's been called out on it. But he has a job to do. But also Kirby makes it clear that there are many things that he just doesn't know. And there's a lot of things he just doesn't want to know. So that when he's standing forward and spinning, all he's guilty of is spinning as opposed to lying. So Kirby knows he's in a very difficult situation, and you can see the discomfort he has sometimes when answering questions that he, that he knows that there's no good answer here, and he doesn't want to lie, but he has to say something to take people off the trail. He has a job to do. But I don't think Kirby's received. First of all, Kirby's not going to be told by the CIA, yeah, we were behind this, or yeah, we trained those guys. What he's going to be told is the cover story. Been playing the game long enough to know when he's being fed a cover story. That's the problem about being an intelligent person. And no matter what I think of Mr. Kirby, he's clearly an intelligent person who has played the game long enough to know patterns of behavior and to know, what the game is that's being played. And he knows that his job right now is to spin a cover story. He knows his job right now is to run cover for the truth. And it makes him uncomfortable because he also knows that he's covering up murder. And that's the big, it's one thing to cover up the destruction of a pipeline, Nord Stream 2. Nobody died. It's another thing to cover up a terrorist attack against innocent civilians in a nuclear armed state that you consider an adversary, because this leads us down the path of potential direct conflict. And that means nuclear war. And that means we all die.
Scott, last question of the night. I know you're going on another program in 5 minutes, so I'll make it quick. Russia's next move from here?
Well, I'm going on a program if the CIA allows me. So they may have tracked down this laptop by now, and who knows, it might go black sooner or later.
Don't say that, man. Don't say that.
I just thought that was hilarious that we were talking about that.
Within seconds, I'm going to watch the replay because within seconds we saw you go down. Yeah, Jesus. Go ahead, sir.
No, so say the question again. What's next?
The question again was, this weekend we saw some action happen yesterday with some targets within Ukraine, but Russia's next move here. What's Putin's next move? Right.
Russia's shutting down Ukraine. We saw it appears that they're attacking targets that they've never attacked before. Ukraine has underground gas storage. And Russia is taking out those. Russia's taking out the terminals that bring the gas in from Poland. Russia's shutting Ukraine down. They're hitting the power generation capabilities. Kharkov is black, and they don't know when they're coming back on. They're taking out air defense systems. It wasn't in Russia's interest to expend, because a lot of these, if you take a look, a lot of the Patriot systems around Kiev are designed to protect strategic targets that the Russians weren't in the past interested in hitting. And so they let them there. Now, when you move those Patriots out and you try and move them to the forward area to start shooting down Russian airplanes, then the Russians took them out. But the systems around Kiev, Russia, it's in Russia's interest to send wave after wave of $10,000 geranium drones so that the Patriot can fire a $10 million missile to intercept it. Russia's like, we'll play this game all day long. And that's what they've been doing. bankrupting Ukraine. It's running down the ammunition. But now that Russia's starting to target specific locations, decision-making centers in Kiev, notice that last night they also took out 2 Patriot systems. I think they're going to basically start making life a living hell for Kiev. The Russians will never deliberately target civilians, but you notice that none of the targets they hit last night were civilian targets. That doesn't mean that there won't be collateral damage on the part of civilians, that some civilians may be casualties. That's war. But Russia's not going to be hitting apartment complexes, shopping centers, concert halls. Russia will hit targets that are directly related to the strategic imperative. In the past, these were targets related to the logistics support that Ukraine was getting from the West. But now that Ukraine has been exposed as a nation that's involved in the planning of terrorist actions inside Russia, Russia will start taking out the targets related to that. I think you're going to see a whole new level of targeting by the Russians, a much more serious game. And I think you're going to see the rapid decline of Ukraine as a political state and the social state, that this decline will match what's happening on the battlefield with the Ukrainian military. We're looking at the total collapse of Ukraine coming forward, and they brought it on themselves. I normally have a lot of sympathy, and I still have sympathy for civilians, but I have no sympathy for any Ukrainian who wears the red and black, any Ukrainian who has bought into or has been silent in the face of the ideology of Stepan Bandera. You brought this on yourselves. You sow the wind, you reap the whirlwind, and the tornado is touching down right now.